Hey guys, this is Jordan Schultz, and this is the Second Win Podcast.
Second Win family, what up? Welcome to another episode of the Second Win Podcast. Of course, I'm Gio here with my brother.
Of course.
My co-host,
Already.
Jay Mills. You
Good
know
to
what I'm
see y'all
saying?
again, man.
We tuned in, we locked in, y'all tuned in. And today, we got one of the hardest NFL insiders in the world. Like, I'm talking, this is somebody who really knows the game. You know, there's a lot of people who are, work with these apps and like they're on TV and they don't really know the game. But if you follow his content, this is someone who dissects the game and he knows the game very well.
Top notch.
Top notch. And that's why he gets the best insider information.
No,
Perfect, man. Glad to have you.
Yeah,
Usually
Mr.
you're on the other side.
I am, yeah.
Mr. Jordan Schultz
Yeah.
is on the show today, man. I appreciate you coming on, brother.
Guys, it's my pleasure. I'm so excited to be on. Excited for you guys as you continue this ascension of the podcast game. And it's a thrill to do it. So thanks for having me.
Well, it's funny how life comes full circle because, like I was just saying, you had DM me in 2019, man. Now we're sitting here doing you.
What did I say?
Got you on
What
the
did I
pod.
say?
You were just.
What up?
I hope you're. I think you said I hope you're excited for the new upcoming season.
Yeah.
We're just having small talk, but just like wow, in 2019 now, look at us. I got you on the podcast, man.
Well, that's definitely a good segue because it is a relationship business.
Yes, sir.
The entire fabric of it is relationships.
Absolutely.
On every side, managerial, agent, team, and obviously from a journalistic insider standpoint.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, for sure. It's like I'm excited for this because you're usually on the other side.
side.
Like you're
Oh, yeah.
usually talking about players' quotes,
Yeah.
like
Contracts,
their contracts,
all that.
teams, GMs. Like that's usually you. And now people get to find out
Who's Jordan?
a little bit about
Thank
you.
For sure.
Well, thank
man.
you for the opportunity. Then
Of course,
Absolutely,
man.
I'll just showcase myself.
Yes, sir.
So just starting off like early life, you had a much different
I did.
childhood than most people.
Yeah.
Your dad being
Yeah.
Howard Schultz,
Yeah.
the CEO of Starbucks,
Yeah.
one of the biggest companies in the world. What was that like? Like, I'm sure you were exposed to a high level of business, like
Yeah.
a high level of intellect, brand building, and just finding out different components about how to be successful. So, like, what was that like growing up and kind of seeing that transpire?
I think my childhood, in terms of the access, was everything became so normalized to me by the time I was coming of age, like 14 to 16, that crucial age, getting into high school. I was so used to being around people of means, and it wasn't just successful people, but oftentimes it was celebrities, pop stars, athletes. And so my childhood was shaped in many ways by those experiences. And because they were so normal to me, I think it has played a pivotal role in the career that I have pursued, because being around athletes in many respects feels like this is normal. This is what I'm supposed to do. And I know how, like, when you see a mega celebrity as a human, like when you see a Jay-Z or a Beyonce, when you see a Bruno Mars, someone that you watch on TV, maybe it's a LeBron, it's really easy to get intimidated or starstruck. And it's not that that doesn't happen to me, but I'm so used to being around people that are considered celebrities.
Yeah.
That from a young age, that people like these, people like those folks were in my home, and I think it normalized it for me. So I bring that up because of the career path I have taken and how that's probably, I think it's helped me a lot. But also on the other side of it, I'm so conscious of not trying to come across a certain way.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I'm really, really focused, or at least I was really focused for a very long time on how not to come across. And
sure.
Seattle, I'm from Seattle, and we're in the Seattle.
It
Rainier
rains
Street.
all the
Yeah.
time there. Jesus.
It rains all the time.
Oh my God.
And I think for me, because it is a smaller town, especially when I was growing up there, like I was so conscious of my last name.
Yeah.
There was a time, and I probably said this a couple times before, but there was a time when I legitimately considered like almost changing my name because I was so embarrassed by it, and embarrassed by my dad's success and my parents' success. And my first car, I'll never forget when I was 15 or 16, my dad was like, all right, you're going to get a car. And we went to the dealership, and it was a Jeep dealership because I wanted to get like a nice car, but I didn't want it to be crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he was like, "Well, let's go to the you know what are you thinking here?" And I said he said, "There's this great Jeep Grand Cherokee," and I said, "Yeah, that's a little too nice. We got to go the Jeep kind of like ghetto version,
right.
with 70,000 miles on it and a messed up clutch."
Yeah.
And so we ended up getting this like old beat up silver Jeep, and I'll never forget it because at my high school, which was a prep school, it wasn't a sleepaway, but it was a prep school, and really, really wealthy kids at the school, predominantly white. Class size was 50, really small, and I didn't like a lot of what that represented. And every kid, I remember, it really bothered me, had a nicer car than teachers. Every kid had a Mercedes or BMW, Aston Martin, Audi. I hated it.
Damn.
Yeah, nobody had a Ferrari. And I was always like, somebody's going to get a Ferrari.
Yeah.
But you're talking about kids with $250,000 cars.
Jesus.
And it really bothered me. And I remember seeing the teachers drive off in, cheaper cars that were older. And then seeing the kids who they were teaching drive off in, $100,000 cars. And I hated that.
Yeah.
So I made sure that I was going to have a Jeep because in Seattle, everyone felt like they knew everyone. And I wanted to break that trend.
Yeah.
And I remember one of my best friends who was not very well off had a really shitty like 2-door Honda Accord that was totally broken down and 20 years old, and he said, I really appreciate that you got this Jeep. It's still better than mine, but you're the only other kid in the school that doesn't have a really nice car. And that stuck with me because eventually I did get a nice car when I got a little bit older, but I remember feeling like this is like this is an opportunity for me to set an example, a precedent. And I was always really conscious of just like not wearing really nice clothes and not having like the new Kobe's or whatever whenever they came out, the new Jordans. I was really conscious, and I went the other way so much. Eventually I had to find an equilibrium. I had to find a balance because it wasn't healthy what I was doing. I was so ashamed of it. I mentioned embarrassed. I actually became ashamed of it, and it started to really affect me and my relationship. So at some point I had to go the other way. I had to sit down with my parents and explain to them where I was coming from, and then they were able to explain to me why it's okay to be proud of who your family is.
Absolutely. And like you just displayed so much humility that shows the type of person that you are, that's an amazing story about you and your friend.
Thank you. Yeah, I think my parents, because they didn't come from money, my dad especially, from Brooklyn Projects, Canarsie, his meal ticket actually was football. I don't know if you know this, but he got a football scholarship to play quarterback, and that's how he got out of Brooklyn. He was not a great student. His parents were really, really, really poor. And my mom, similarly in Ohio, and they actually met in New York City when they were both broke and living paycheck to paycheck. So I think for me, seeing how my parents made it and knowing that I was never going to have that, it affected me in a way that I wanted them to be really proud of who I was as a person,
That's a great perspective.
It's hard to explain though, because like my parents, what they accomplished, and specifically my dad with Starbucks, like that's like a one of one, He's really like unicorny, and I realized that I'm not going to have that same level of success, especially financially, and it took me a really long time to come to grips with that.
Going back to your young days, you were a college basketball star.
No, not star.
Star, man.
High school basketball.
It's okay.
Your first team all
conference, man. You were doing your thing. How did you transition into, sports is going to be my avenue when it's so easy to be like, I'm going to take over the family business?
Yes.
I feel like anyone in that situation, the family business, but sports was your first avenue. How'd you get into that? Like, who sparked that love for you?
Definitely my dad, and I'm seeing it even now with my son who's 6, how he's becoming obsessed with sports. I was the same way. My dad introduced baseball, basketball, football to me, the big 3, when I was like 6, 7 years old. And I got really into basketball, and that was the path I took. And I realized I knew I was good enough to play in college, and I also knew that was going to be the end. And I wanted to remain in sports, but I did not want to be an agent, and I didn't want to be on the team side. So the only other side was the reporting journalism side. However, I knew that at some point I was going to have this conversation with my parents about like not taking over the business. And so when I was probably about 16, I sat down with him, and we had conversations, but never really like a real big one where I was like, here's where I'm at.
Yeah.
I don't want to get into Starbucks. I want to go the opposite way. Like the media side, I don't even think they were expecting that. They knew I wasn't going to pursue Starbucks, but
Right.
they didn't know it was going to be like a media thing.
Right.
So they were, but to their credit, they were really supportive. And I'll never forget my dad said, this is a good thing, because if you do the Starbucks route, you're never going to get out of my shadow that I've casted. And people are just going to assume that you're here because of me, and that's probably going to be true anyway, because you are here because of me. It never was going to work for me, especially my personality.
Yeah, for sure.
Wanting to like make it on my own and just like
Have your own avenue.
yeah. And the other part about it too was my dad had so many connections, but he wasn't really well connected in the sports world. Like he knew people, but he wasn't super connected in the sports world like he was with business. In Seattle alone, you have Bill Gates, Microsoft, you have Jeff Bezos, Amazon, and you have Howard Schultz, Starbucks, plus Boeing, plus Expedia. You have so many different outlets.
Crazy.
Nike's next door in Portland. So he had all these business connections, but I felt like the sports thing was a way for me to separate myself while also staying true to myself as an athlete.
Yeah,
I was a good athlete. I wasn't a great athlete, and I felt like I had to work really hard just to play in college for 4 years. And if I can use that mentality to pursue the sports journalism side, I love to write. I love being in front of the camera, and most importantly, I love the athletes. I love the relationships. I felt like that camaraderie that I had in college was going to serve me well.
When you were playing sports, like, did you ever still have like, oh, I still may take over the fan, or you knew from the jump, like, I'm not doing it?
When I was probably, I think, like just old enough to understand who my parents were, so like 12, 13, 6th grade, 7th grade, I think I realized I wasn't going to do it. Even if it wasn't a decision, I think I knew.
Yeah.
I think I knew, because I couldn't get over the fact that like this was it felt like it was going to be handed to me.
Yeah.
Like my whole life, you know how people say he was born on first base, second base?
Yeah.
Like, I feel like I was born on home plate. Like I went around I went around once.
Yeah.
And if I do the Starbucks thing, then like, man, it's like cheating.
But that's also
It's
not
like
your
fishing
fault.
with
You're
dinosaurs.
born with a grand slam.
For
Yeah.
sure.
But it also wasn't my passion. I often wonder if I was super passionate about the business and Starbucks, if I was really passionate, how much more complicated that would have been for me, because then it would have been a real issue. If I really wanted to pursue it, but I was torn, then it would have been really tough for me. But my dad my dad and mom, but in this case, my dad did a really good job of exposing me. I would go into the office a lot as a kid. The office was 15 minutes from our house by downtown. And I would go and I'd walk around and I'd see how people would talk to my dad. And I just remember watching and feeling like the way that they interact with him, the respect they had for him, but also the fact that like, this is going to come across as strange a little bit maybe to the listeners, but I always would tell him, so I would see how much they respected him and how much they appreciated him.
Yeah.
But I also felt like, they were employees, and oftentimes in my life, whenever I've had issues with my parents, especially my dad, I've told him, you have to remember I'm not an employee. Like I don't, I don't work for you.
Right.
And these are, we're both, I think, pretty headstrong. And my mom, being this like intermediary, has always tried to balance it. But the bottom line is, when I saw how people would treat him, I guess I didn't want people to look at me like that, because I hadn't earned it the way that he had.
Absolutely.
He built the company for 45 years. That was never going to be me. So I think I always knew, to answer your question.
No, much respect.
I feel like, you as an insider, you kind of have like a get it out the mud mentality.
Yeah.
Like you said,
which is counterintuitive to what we just talked about.
Right. Yeah, but you have that mentality. You were like, I kind of want to go into sports because my dad didn't have that many connections. But your dad, I read an article about him where he got denied for Starbucks 217 times.
Yes.
Right? So he kind of had that get it out the mud mentality
he really
too.
Did.
So, it's kind of passed down to you. Do you feel like your father really like kind of set that precedent, and like you knowing his story was like, I'm going to get it out the mud myself, just like how he did?
I really do. It's become more and more evident to me as I've gotten older too, how that was really important to them, and therefore, as a kid, it was instilled in me that it was important to me. Like, in other words, people see Starbucks now and 40,000 stores worldwide and however approaching 180 countries, whatever it is. They've had so much success, and the brand is so ubiquitous with money, basically, right?
Yep.
It's hard to imagine what it was at one point for him, which was in 1982. Before I was born, they moved to Seattle. They had no money, and he worked as a barista at Starbucks. So people don't know this. Starbucks was actually, I think they had 2 or 3 stores. He didn't create Starbucks. What happened was he went and worked there because he fell in love with the espresso and coffee nature of Italy. He was on a trip working for a company called Xerox in Milan, and he was walking the streets, and he noticed how people were basically spending hours at the espresso bar throughout the course of a day, and he was there for like a week, and it was the same people every day, and they were having real conversations, and they weren't just taking their coffee and leaving. It was like a community, and he wanted to bring that back to the U.S. He was such a visionary. So what happened was he got back. Long story short, he's working for Starbucks. He doesn't have the money to buy Starbucks, which was at $1.4 million. So what he does is he actually launches another company called Il Giornale, and they have a couple stores in Seattle for a year. He gets enough money together to do that. A year later, Starbucks now says, we're ready to sell. And he says, okay, I want the company because most importantly, I want that name. He felt like the name and the logo, that siren, the mermaid, was super special. And he knew that no matter what he did, he couldn't replicate that name.
Right.
And so what he did was he had to raise about $1.5 million, and he was, I think he was like maybe 400,000 short, which was a lot of money at the time, mid 80s. And he started going door to door, pitching people in Seattle.
Wow.
Just door to door.
Door to door.
Forget the banks. Like, he was going, knocking on people. Hi, I'm Howard Schultz. He had a big pitch deck. This is what I want to do.
Persistent.
I want to sell coffee for $4 a cup, which was fucking crazy.
Yes,
in the mid 80s. Forget now. Like, it's still a lot of money, but the mid 80s, like $4 a cup of coffee. And they were like, are you out of your mind? He was really young. He was probably 27, 26.
Had a dream, had a vision.
Yeah, had a vision.
Yeah.
And what happened was he had an unbelievable relationship with my mom's dad, who was just mensch of a man, Midwest values, was the first person in Lime, Ohio, very small town by Dayton, to hire anybody, any minority, black, brown, Asian, anybody. And he hired everybody. And because he was so well respected in the town, the rest of the town followed suit and essentially desegregated over the course of 10 years.
So dope.
That's fire.
So he had this relationship with my mom's dad that was like beautiful. And this guy, he passed away when I was a kid. He was an unbelievable man. And he told my dad, this is like probably 85, because I wasn't born yet. My mom was pregnant, 86. He said, you need to quit this hobby and you need to take care of my daughter. And my dad broke down and was hysterical. Like, he couldn't believe that the man he loved more than his own dad told him that. And he went back and he said, it's over. This is when he couldn't raise that money. And he had no salary for over a year. And he said to my mom, it's over. I'm going to move on. And my mom forced him. Thankfully had the insight,
that's amazing.
and the foresight to say, no, you have to see this through. Especially, we moved across the country.
Man.
She was 5 or 6 months pregnant with me. And they had no money. And basically said that this is how it's going to be. So, okay. So long story short, I don't even remember your original question, but that drive and that, I guess, commitment to your core belief, I think really stuck with me.
Those traits.
Shout out to your mom, man.
Yeah, that's a
She
real one. Oh,
She
my
really is
She
like
really-
the one
Yeah,
who held it down. Like,
that's
every
fire.
king needs his queen, man.
100%. And I don't think very few people know that story. He's talked about it, but it hasn't really like gotten the same amount of love. Like,
No, that's an amazing
It's always
story.
it's the man behind the man. In this case, the woman behind the man, and she was the one that really kept the dream alive when it was super, super on the verge of being over.
Damn, like, you talk about that community back then, like, just a couple people talking every day for coffee, and now you look at it and it's like there's a cult. There's literally a cult.
I know.
No one wants to leave Starbucks.
I'm
And
talking
every time
to-
I
Yeah,
go in
it's
there,
like, okay, you can.
like, no, every time I
Yeah.
go in there, it's like people doing homework. They're there all day.
I used to date a girl, right? And one time I tried to go to another coffee spot. Like, it was just like, I was just driving by. I was like, yo, let's go here. She almost ripped my head off.
Not
'Cause-
cheat.
'cause
Don't
no-
cheat
no
on
Starbucks.
Starbucks. Not cheating on
We didn't go to
Starbucks.
Starbucks.
But it
She's
didn't
like,
work out with.
I mean, I go to Starbucks now because she introduced me to like Starbucks,
brand.
and I was like, yo,
Yeah.
this is fire.
What's the 3 things you said? You said it was like home, kids, Starbucks,
Okay, so it was home. It was home and work.
work.
And then my dad wanted to create a homework, basically like hybrid.
Okay, yeah.
So it was like you're at home, so you'd be talking to your friends, and you're at work, you'd be doing whatever it is you do at work. Well, now let's marry the two together at the like the local coffee shop. That was essentially the idea at the time before they expanded.
Well, that's amazing. So, just give us a rundown of like your NFL insider career. Like, what story really broke it for you?
Yeah.
Like that industry wise. Like, kind of give us a rundown on how that happened.
I was so I was at ESPN for 3 years, and I was doing a myriad of things. I was doing sports betting on ESPN2. I was doing college basketball features. Actually, wasn't even doing that much NFL, almost none. But what happened was, as I was leaving ESPN, basically, I decided that I couldn't do everything all at once. I wasn't going to be able to do basketball and football and NFL and college. It was too much for me. And on top of that, I was like, you were always worried about the next thing, because just as an example, you'd have like the NFL draft and free agency, right? But then the NBA draft was coming, and then NBA free agency was coming. But now NFL free agency is not really over, and camp started. It was overlapping. And more importantly, the relationships were becoming too hard to manage. When I originally set out, I was okay doing basketball and football because I love both, and because I didn't know that many people. So I was meeting people, and I was growing those relationships, but there weren't that many relationships to harness and grow.
Right. Yep.
As I got a little bit more established and I started meeting more agents and players and executives, I realized that it was becoming impossible to manage, let alone one, but multiple sports. Was really tough.
It is a lot.
So I decided literally like a year and a half ago that I was going to just do the NFL insider role and just really give it a shot, because I kept getting told from different people, like, Max Kellerman's a really good buddy of mine, right? And he said, people don't know what to do with you. Are you a journalist? Are you an insider? Are you an analyst? What are you?
You're jack of all trades.
Yeah, but at some point that's a bad thing.
It is a bad thing sometimes.
It was like a football player. If you're a utility guy,
Yep.
and you kind of just decent at everything.
Yeah.
I guess that's valuable, but it can also be hard.
You're a man without a position. They don't know where to put you.
Right. You're floating.
Yep.
Yeah. And, maybe you feel a need here, but you're not really great at it. And I was just constantly feeling like I was like a hamster on a hamster wheel. So I listened to Max, and we had the conversation here across the hall, and he said, you gotta just do one thing. And I don't care what it is, but you need to make sure that it is something you're really passionate about. So I went the NFL insider route, and knowing that there were more, just of sheer volume, right? Like there were 53-man roster compared to 12. More coaches.
So much more volume.
More opportunity. Yeah. And I knew I wasn't going to get all the A's and B's, but if I could get some of the C's, like the mid-level guys, the mid-level contracts, that's valuable.
Yeah.
And that was what I set out to do last year, and I was able to break some real stories. And then what happened was, last spring, I had developed this really good relationship with Gronk, and throughout the course of like 2 years, where it was nothing about football really. It was everything about like just developing a friendship. And we had this, you guys have been at my house now, you've seen some of the animals. We have 3 dogs and a cat here. My wife and me are animal people, right? And I love animals. That's like my other mission. I don't eat meat. I'm very animal focused. And so we had an opportunity to do something together in the pet space, and we did it. And he really saw, I think, my like genuine love of animals and helping those who can't be helped. And so when it came down to it, I had said to him, listen, I know you're going to make a decision in the next few months here, and if there's ever an opportunity to break the news and you don't want to do it yourself, I would be honored, whether or not you retire or come back. This is a year ago.
Yeah.
And he says, I got you. And it was actually about 5 or 6 months had gone by, and it's not that I didn't think it was going to happen, but I just know how competitive the space is.
Super.
And
everyone wants to be the first.
Everyone wants to be first. And with someone like Gronk, who might retire, it's like there's going to be like 30 reporters on this story. You got local beat, national beat, you got everything in between. And he says, I got you. And I left it alone. It's always that tough point of do you want to push or not push?
Absolutely.
And with him, I left it alone because I had the sense that he was getting hit by everyone.
Yeah.
And let me just leave it. And what happened was, it was like a random Thursday or something, and I think he called me or he texted me and he says, I have a decision. And then I think he called me and he says, yeah, I'm going to retire. And you can announce it, but I need you to wait 15 or 20 minutes, basically, is what he said. And first of all, I was shocked. I really thought he was coming back.
Yeah. Oh, you did?
I did. And secondly, I thought, because Brady was coming back.
Yeah.
And secondly, I thought, like, this is going to get leaked. And so when he called, when I was on the phone, I was like, I couldn't believe this was actually happening.
Yeah, like, this is it.
But now my mind's racing of, if I know, who else knows?
Right.
You know, and basically what happened was, we get off I think this is a while ago, but I think we got off the phone, and like a minute later, I was like, fuck, this is going to get leaked. I think I texted him and I said, is there any way we can speed up that process, even by like 5 or 10 minutes?
Like, get something drafted up real quick?
Right.
Like,
No, I had it drafted.
Oh, you already had it?
I had it drafted.
Okay.
But what I was hoping was he would say, just go, don't wait the 15, 20 minutes. And he says, I think he said, no, we need to wait. And I said, no problem. And then it was like, I don't know, 30 seconds later, he was like, fuck it. Just go.
Yeah.
You got it.
Send
I got
it.
you. You got it. You've always had. It was like a really beautiful moment.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I was like, are you sure? And he's like, I'm sure. I'm going to put it out on Instagram. I think he said in like 15 minutes. You go first. Put it out. And it was like an avalanche.
Oh, my
phone.
God.
Crazy.
Yeah. And then he retweeted it too. And on top of that, he said, I don't want you to say source. I want you to say it's from me, so people know it's real. And people know that we're boys. And like all of that together, and Gronk, and just the validation, it was fucking crazy. In my phone, you know, I've had the opportunity to break some really cool things, but nothing like that. A Gronk retirement.
That's huge.
I don't know how anything could ever come close to that. It was just, given the player, the stature, and then the retirement announcement, and for him to say it was coming from him, and I got this, and then he validates it with the retweet. It was like, it was insane.
Yeah.
It's 100% true.
And it's all relationship.
It was all relationships. And once it settled down, I saw him a few months later, and I said to him, you know, I just wanted to say again, I really appreciate it. And he said, well, you never pushed. And I thought, God, there's so many times where I wanted to reach out. You know, every month you want to reach out. Every few weeks, hey, how's it going? Because I'll reach out, how's it going? But I wasn't saying what's up with the news, you know. And he said, I really appreciated that you never pushed the news part of it. You just kept the friendship genuine. And when it was time, I knew you were the guy.
That's what it's all
that
about.
That was insane, and it really validated me. And maybe, like, I don't know if it validated me to other people, but that's what it felt like.
Yeah.
Because after that, it just seemed like all the agents and teams were much more willing to deal with me.
Yeah.
You know?
It only really takes one thing. Like,
Big
in a
one.
lot of things
To
in
pop
life, it
off.
only
Yeah.
takes one opportunity. It only takes one yes
Yeah.
before everything, you know, kind of blows up. And that was such a it
Satisfying.
probably satisfied you so much.
did.
It was like, this is my big break.
Yeah.
You know, how awesome was that for you to be like, okay, like, yeah, you know, I'm Howard Schultz's son.
Yeah.
But I'm also Jordan Schultz, and like, this is it. Like, I'm
Yeah.
doing this now, you know? Like, how awesome was that?
It was awesome.
Yeah.
Especially because the news was so big that it hit everywhere. Everyone saw it. And I think just having my name attached to it was really validating for me, just selfishly, you know. And I said to Rob, I saw him at the Super Bowl, you know, a few months back in Phoenix. And whenever I see him, I just give him a big hug. I'm just like, my dog.
Yeah,
you know, he
that's
knows.
good,
He's
man.
like, I got you. And I said, you know, I told him then, I said, you know, you didn't have to do that. And he said, I know, but it was, you
That's
know,
a great
it was
friend.
the right thing to do. It was
It's
a
like,
great
it's like getting drafted first round. Your whole life changes.
overnight.
Overnight.
But like, you feel, people would say overnight success, but you feel like it's not. But it's a compliment because now, and then I had to balance that with this whole like inner battle of these demons of, well, I have these innate advantages, and I would have never met Gronk if it wasn't for this. But I didn't meet Gronk through my pop, and that was really satisfying for me. I met him through other people, other friends, and was actually Jamal Adams, who's a good buddy of mine, and it was his. It was a connection through him
Yeah.
that I had made on my own, and that was really gratifying for me because again, I didn't want. There was a point too where I didn't want to meet anybody through my parents in the sports world. Anybody else was fine. Like if it was if it was like a Bono, someone they were friendly with, that was cool. But if it was a sports connection, I didn't want that, and I had to balance that, and I still have to. But the fact that it was satisfying, it was so satisfying for me because it was through my own connections, and it was a genuine friendship.
Being in the media world, you know, everyone pushes to be first, right? So how do you balance being first, but also being right and being truthful, right? So you get a guy like Adam Schefter, right? He's built up a rapport of like, okay, when he puts stuff out, it's believable.
People believe it. Yeah,
you know what I'm saying? So how do you build that type of rapport now with the industry that you're in and being first or wanting to be first?
Yeah, it's the most important question probably on a day-to-day basis. And I've certainly made mistakes. I don't want to shy away from mistakes because I know that you'll learn from them. It's really, really difficult when there's a select group of people doing the same thing, fighting for the same information, and they've been doing it for a lot longer. Like I said, I've really only been doing it for a year and a half, the NFL insider role. And as great as the relationships are, I might have a good relationship, for example, with a GM, but that might only be a year or two old, maybe 3 years.
Yeah.
Whereas another insider like an Adam maybe has known him since he was a scout. That's just an example, but those are tough.
Yeah,
right?
that's a long period of time.
It's tough. And so that's I do value the relationships with the less established executives, for example, because you want to help them, and then hopefully when they're in a position they can help you and you can have that genuine relationship. However, I would say day to day, that's probably the hardest thing of being first, being right, and then sometimes you think you're first, but you're not first, and you look like an asshole if you might put something out and then it's like a few minutes late, but Twitter is so crazy and fast that you didn't see it, and then you have to text that person and they're mad. It's crazy.
It's so hard even, I feel like nowadays, because there's so many beat reporters, there's so many people.
And Twitter is the equalizer.
There's so many people, like sometimes you don't even know what to believe.
Yeah.
Or what's true or what's not true.
Okay, so how often do you read a report and you instantly think this is probably not true?
Probably. Honestly, the last time I did that was probably like throughout the Lamar Jackson stuff. I was like, no, that's not true.
And that was a tough one because he didn't have an agent.
Yeah.
And the Ravens aren't a notorious leaking team. So the information, I always felt like anybody that said, I know exactly what's going on with the Lamar Ravens situation, it was like, I was like really hesitant to believe because I didn't really know what was going on. I felt like I had not a good viewpoint of it other than just talking to players.
Right.
So that was difficult. And that's an example of there was a lot of rumors swirling around with Lamar and the Ravens that came to me, and they were secondhand. And there was a few of them that were super juicy that I wanted to put out, but I couldn't get it validated, verified from someone that really would know.
Yeah.
And so that's an example of using your discretion to sit and understand it's better to be right than first. I have made mistakes. I have been wrong. I'm sure it'll happen again. But it's really difficult daily and during free agency. Oh my God.
That's the worst.
It's crazy.
And 9 times out of 10, I just ask him because he's in it.
Yeah,
you know
he knows.
He would know more than me.
I'm in it. And
you know what I'm saying?
The craziest thing is seeing it on Twitter.
And you already know?
And I already know some of the stuff. Like I'll be sitting next to the guy and I'll see something on Twitter
That's
and
not
be
true?
like, that is completely false.
There's some stuff he doesn't even tell me. I'd be like, is this true? And he knows it might be, and he'll wait till it breaks and be like, I knew.
Twitter is the craziest thing. Like there's so many different possibilities.
X wants this money or these teams or this relationship, and it's oftentimes not true. That's why, honestly, like the players always know. I feel like the players know if a guy can play.
Yep.
The players know if a guy works. That's probably the best indication. If you have the validation from the player, it's probably right.
Yeah, it's like
But that's a tough one, man.
That is a tough one.
Free agency, when you're probably on the phone 20 hours, like your screen time, and you're probably sleeping like 2 or 3 hours a day. Like those other, it's off. It's pretty miserable. but it's so gratifying to get the story.
Yeah.
I was actually gonna ask you that because every time I open my phone, I see you. So I'm just like, does this dude have it on drafts? Like, you're always posting. Like, you're always working.
Always,
like, every time I open my phone, I see you. So I'm just like, no,
I'm on it. Yeah. I'm the only one running my Twitter feed. It's all me. You'll have stuff drafted. If you're privy to information about, let's say like, trying to think of when Paris Campbell was coming to New York, like I knew he was coming to New York. And so I had a story written. I had drafts and I had Twitter drafts of different language in the contract. I had everything.
Fire.
So when it was time, it was just send.
People don't appreciate that. Yeah. They don't know the work.
I'm going to show you just to give you an idea of the drafts in my phone.
that goes back
to
the.
Just look at the draft. These are all drafts.
It's like 50.
Just in the bag.
Yeah, that's
all the different possibilities.
Those are all possibilities of players and teams. There's a couple coaches in there.
Stay ready so you don't have to get ready.
100%.
Stay ready so you don't have to get ready.
Like that. I'm sitting on that. So I'm sitting on it.
Sitting on it.
I have the graphic. I have the story, and the truth is, there's a pretty decent chance that doesn't even happen. But if it does happen, I want to be ready because those 30 seconds or a minute really matter. And if you look at the timestamps of reporter A versus reporter B, if I have it at 4:55 and he has it at 4:57 or she has it at 5:01, those timestamps matter because you can definitively say I was first.
Yeah.
And it matters to me, it matters to fans, it matters to my employer selfishly. So you have to be ready because you really don't know when it's going to happen. It's always at the most random fucking times, dude. Like 11:07 p.m. getting ready to go to bed. 5:04 a.m. Like you're not even up, but your phone beeps. Right. So you have to be ready.
I hope you guys are listening. There's a lot of work that goes behind the scenes.
I can appreciate just a tweet that they just do. It's a lot that goes on behind the scenes.
Behind the scenes, man.
With all the connections that you've made in the sports world, like who's someone that you've learned a lot from, or just a story that like has always stuck with you about anybody in this industry?
Okay, so a sports story, right?
Yeah,
that's a good one. Because there's a few that stand out. I'm like, I just had to think about
something that you can tell.
Something I can tell. Yeah, there's not some good stuff too.
I know.
Okay, so something positive in theory from another reporter, right?
Anything.
It could be anything. Yeah.
It doesn't matter. Just
okay. I'm thinking
something that you're like, wow, that really happened.
Okay,
that was
I think
cool.
This isn't a perfect answer, but when I was probably like 25 and I still really didn't know who I was in this space. I mean, I don't even think I had a real job in the industry yet. I actually did sit down with Schefter, and it's important to have an agent in this space.
Yeah.
And my agent at the time, he really was more of a friend. He ended up signing me, but at the time he was more of like an ally. He said, "I think you have potential. I'm going to help you out." I think he represented Adam, or they were friendly, and Adam sat down with me for like 40 minutes, and he walked me through how he did it. And it meant a lot to me because I was so young and inexperienced and green. And he really showed me like, here's what you need to do. And I remember thinking like, that's what I want to do, right? Yeah. And I didn't even know I was going to do football, and I didn't even know I was going to do the insider role. But I just remember thinking like, this is how I want to be. I want to have that. I want to command that level of respect. So that was really good. And I always appreciated Adam for that because he didn't have to do it. Trying to think of another.
That's dope.
What was the re-ask the question, because maybe I can give you a separate, like a different answer.
Like who's someone that you've met, or like any story from being in the sports industry that has always stayed with you, that you're like, damn, like that was
okay.
Really cool.
Well, so this goes all the way back to my parents, and I don't like. I typically don't like talking about the stuff with my dad because he, when I was 14, he bought the Sonics. Did you guys know that?
Didn't know that.
He had the NBA team. And so I was like, biggest basketball fan ever.
Yeah.
My dad says to me when I'm 14, like, this is what I'm thinking about doing. And obviously, I was really excited about it. And he had this idea in his mind that he could mold the Sonics into like how we did with Starbucks. Mm-hmm. Where it was a really relationship-driven industry, and it just—I don't know if it was his his philosophy or if it was the time in the NBA, early 2000s, but it just didn't work out. It was an utter disaster. And he couldn't come to grips with the fact that the players weren't relating to him and he wasn't relating to the players. And there were a few guys that he developed really good friendships with, but for the most part, it was really hard for him to create that type of culture. And that's a buzzword now, culture, but for him, it matters.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, this is how badly something can go if you're not prepared. And this is one of the big mistakes he made, I think, is he was never really prepared for what owning an NBA team really meant. Yeah. And I think it took him a really long time to figure that out. And even after he sold the team, he probably it took like a decade plus for him to really come to grips with it. And he wasn't prepared for the first time in his life of what to do when something didn't go the way he wanted it to go. And that really stuck with me because I also saw how players were being treated by the media, and I hated it. Yeah. And I was friendly with a lot of the guys because they weren't that much older than me. You know, I used to like work out with Ray Allen and Rashard Lewis. You know, I was a decent player, but I wasn't obviously at their level. But like Ray Allen broke my nose playing basketball. Like Ray Allen broke my nose in a one-on-one game. That's how like tight I was with a lot of these guys.
That's crazy.
And so I got to the point where I'll never forget this. This is a dovetail story, but when you remember Rashard Lewis, who's a really good player.
Yeah.
Sniper.
Yeah. When Rashard Lewis
that's broke.
Was yeah.
No, that's
broke.
how Rashard broke. No, that's how
he was kind of a flip.
No. That's how Rashard Lewis used to shoot.
He was like up
if
here,
you know basketball.
He would your shot is broke. I know
how he used to shoot. If we play horse,
you wouldn't.
I'm the best horse. I swear, I'm the best horse player. I'm the best horse player.
You're a good horse player. Okay.
That's it. I can't really. That's all him.
No handle.
No, but I can shoot all day.
Usually football players can't shoot. They're too muscly.
Uptight. Yeah. No, I'm smooth with it.
You're okay. So, anyways. Long story short, Rashard is negotiating his extension with my dad. I'm probably like 17, 16, and he's coming over to the house, and we're playing horse, and he was getting hammered, though. It felt like he was getting hammered for, like, wanting too much money, and I just remember, like, how nasty that negotiation was. And he was really young, too, at the time. He hadn't really gotten paid yet. He was a second-round pick out of high school. And I remember him saying, like, you know, it was hard. You know, it was a hard few weeks, and anyways, I just remember how negative the media was. And it always felt like, especially in Seattle, the media was out to get the players.
Yeah.
And they just shit on the players all the time. And my dad, he hated that. And I hated it by proxy. And I always thought I could do something. If I was going to pursue this as I got older, I realized I could do it the opposite of that. I could do it differently and empower the players.
I thought you were going to tell a story about how you worked out with Magic, because I think that's the
Magic.
I think that's the coolest thing in the world, bro. Like, I don't care. I'm going to school, bro. I worked out with Magic Johnson. Like,
but that's not even the best part. So Starbucks Notorious does not franchise.
Yeah,
everything's company owned, and they were actually the first company in North America to give full health care and stock options to full and part-time employees. It was all about what my dad's dad didn't have. And so he really wanted to create a company that his dad would have been proud to work for. And what happened was, fast forward, they didn't franchise, and there was an opportunity with Magic to franchise a few stores in South Central and go to Compton and Watts and build Starbucks, but Magic Johnson branded Starbucks. The thought process being that if there was ever going to be a franchise, it was going to be Magic Johnson in Southern California. Like, he's a god.
He's that guy.
Yeah,
he's the guy. He is the guy. And what happened was, through that relationship with my dad and Magic, I got really close to Magic because he was like basketball royalty.
Yeah.
He was spending weekends and weeks at my house as a kid. Like Magic, I used to go on runs with the guy, you know, and we'd hoop together.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
We played in a 3-on-3 tournament together.
That's crazy.
That's nuts.
Yeah,
could you imagine that? Like, yo, I really was playing with Magic.
And when I was in college, and this is a story again I probably haven't told, but I value the relationship with you guys, and I've been hesitant to tell this story just because like it sounds so spoiled. But when I was in college in LA, he would take me to UCLA and we work out at Pauley Pavilion for like 3 hours, just him and me. And he'd shut down the gym, right? Like they'd be like, whatever you want. And he'd be like, this is my guy. And he'd bring me in, he'd work me out. for like 2-3 hours, and then we'd go like to Whataburger or something.
That's
like after,
amazing.
you know. And he really he was at my wedding. Like he
invested in you.
He invested in me. Yeah, and I think that those were really special times for me. You know, as a kid you don't truly know like how crazy that is. You know, it's like crazy, but when you're that young, 15, 16, and you're so immersed in the lifestyle that I was fortunate enough to have, I don't think I truly realized like how special that was at the time.
It's an amazing story.
Yeah.
It's probably one of the best stories I've ever heard.
Yeah. Which one do you like better, that or the Ray Allen? Because Ray Allen legitimately shattered my fucking nose. Like
Ray
blood
Allen,
gushing, I had to go to emergency room.
Nah, Ray Allen's story is hard because that means he was going hard. You know how like
he was going hard.
He was going hard. You know how when you play with NBA players, they be like, "Oh,
they
I'm too
just
good."
fuck around.
I'm
Yeah.
like,
If
he's breaking your nose, bro, that means like he had you in the post and he was.
He may hit you on one of these.
Yeah.
Like
So
jail ball.
So the real what happened was super quick. I'll tell you, it was Seafair weekend in Seattle, which is where the Blue Angels, the F-18s, come and fly. It's an air show. Yeah. It's awesome. It's the biggest weekend of the year. First weekend of August every year in Seattle. It's perfect weather. Ray Allen came over to the house because my dad owned the team, and he invited him over, and he had 15 friends with him. It was like a beautiful day. Yeah. And I'm 19 now. And now I'm in college, and I'm in great shape, and I'm strong.
You ready?
And I'm ready. And I had worked out with him 30 times, but it had been a while, and he was, you got kind of big, and I was like, you want to play? Yeah. And he's like, well, we have a few other people here. Do you want to play twos? I was like, no, let's play cutthroat, which is like rotating 1-on-1.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And so we're playing at 7, and I had game point, and I was yapping.
You was talking shit.
I was talking shit. There were a lot of people there, and I was a little bit, you
feeling yourself,
And he was like, he was like, are you sure you want to go there? Like to me, and I was like, come on, like let's go.
Come on, playing with you, boy.
And so he locked me up, and then he had check, and I was actually guarding him, and I was really guarding him tight, and it was game point, and I was like, you can't lose in front of all your friends here.
Right.
And he like did a really, NBA players have really sharp elbows. He just ripped through with the ball. Elbow first, and it just my nose is shattered, and I had to go to the emergency room. It was insane. There were so many people
blood everywhere.
Oh
my god!
Like my girl was there, like her friends were there, my best friend was there. They were like, "Oh my god, your nose!"
But at least you didn't lose, though. You went out.
I technically didn't lose.
You didn't lose.
You went out on your shield.
Yeah.
You would have beat.
And here's the best part: Ray sent me up the next day or the next week. He was calling me. He was like, I feel so badly. He's like, I just sent you something. He's like, check the mail. And it was I don't know if you remember the PSP. It was like a PlayStation portable. And it was like NBA Live 06 with Ray on the cover.
Oh.
And he's like, this will help you out over the next few weeks. So I got
amazing.
a PSP and a Ray Allen game.
You know, to this point, you've had an amazing story.
Yeah.
You know, if you had to describe your life to this point in one word or phrase, what do you think it'd be?
I would say otherworldly blessed would be the 2 words. Just because, like, you know, I talked about my parents and my dad having like one-on-one success, but by proxy, my experiences have been shaped by their success because of the financial impact, you know, the resources.
Yeah.
So going to private school, not having to like work, not having to like worry about am I getting enough money to pay rent, you know? Yeah. Can I send my kids, can I afford to send my kids to really good schools? Mm-hmm. Man, just like simple things that you might take for granted, traveling across the country to an event, you know, knowing that I had the means to afford to do that. Going to nice dinners. These are just, I've been so blessed that, and it's nothing that I didn't earn that. And so I'm just super conscious. And as we were saying early on in the conversation, right? Like I'm so conscious of how that could be perceived that, again, like when I was saying, I almost wanted to change my name. There was a time where I was not going out ever and not spending any money because I felt like so ashamed of it. So I don't think I'll ever like fully be comfortable with it, but this is probably the most comfortable I've been with who I am because I'm 37 now. I've really taken me a long time to understand it, but otherworldly blessed for the sole reason that I was born into it. I didn't earn any of it. And now it's really on me to earn my own and make my own career.
Man,
I respect that.
Your
man.
humility and like your approach to life is so crazy because 99.98% of people in your situation would act completely different, but you're just a regular guy. You know, you treat everyone else like a regular guy. Like you treat the mailman like the CEO.
Yeah.
So grateful.
I'm really grateful because I think that's probably how I was. I mean, it is how I was raised.
Yeah.
And I'm just trying to think back to like something I did wrong where I was like a brat, you know, and how my parents corrected me. And I'm sure there were things that happened where I didn't recognize it at the time, but like my parents my mom really would say to me like, you don't want to be these kids like at the school I went to.
Yeah.
Right.
These are the kids. You see it every day of what not to do.
Right.
Yeah. You don't want to do that. And so just, you know, stay true to yourself and to our values and try to keep in mind that, you know, we had to work really, really hard to get to this point so that you could have a better life, but also so that you could appreciate it and you can now help and you could make an impact. Oftentimes I think to myself, like, given the resources that I grew up with and that I have, could I be doing and should I be doing something that's like more meaningful, right? Because sports journalism is kind of a selfish field. You're doing it because you love basketball or football.
Yeah.
I'm not really making anybody's life like better.
I know what you mean.
It's a selfish thing to do in a sense. And so that goes back to trying to, okay, so this is what I want to do. I do want to be great at this, but I also have a responsibility that comes with what my parents achieved, which is it's not just like writing checks, but it's showing up and really making an impact. When my dad was still at Starbucks, he just retired. They used to do these job fairs where they would go and they'd get all these Fortune 500 companies and really run down areas to basically hire kids that would never have gotten hired because they wouldn't have been exposed to it. And if you weren't educated, they were going to help you get into school. It was really like awesome. And so I went to one in DC and there was this kid that was like really struggling, you know, probably like 19. This is probably 6 or 7 years ago. He was really struggling. And he asked me like, how did you get here? And I said to him, well, you know, this is actually my parents and I didn't really, you know, I didn't do this. And he was so taken aback by the fact that I was spending my time, and I was so taken aback by him being affected by it. And it really stuck with me. And to be honest, I don't know what happened to the kid. I tried to help him for 30 minutes or whatever it was, but I was so like, I left feeling so proud of the fact that he was so touched by me being there when like I didn't have to. Anyways, I really want to impact people in a way that is meaningful. So day to day, it's really trying to empower athletes, but on a bigger scale, I still don't think I've really found my purpose of really what it is beyond just the sports. Because I'm very singular focused. Like it's every day you're in this field. We talked about the phone, the usage. You don't have a lot of time to really focus on anything else. Because if you really want to be great, like anything else, you have to really focus on that one thing. So at some point, I'm gonna have to find that. I haven't found it yet.
Well, you've already made an impact on me, man, just from this. So don't, for real.
I'm curious, what's your guys' goal with the pod? Because you've obviously had some success now. You're growing. You're still learning. But what do you really want to, like, let's 5 years down the road.
He can speak for himself. But I think for me personally speaking, when I had this podcast idea in my mind and when I was talking.
Was your idea?
No, well, it was our idea together. But just like we used to talk about it all the time. But from a selfish standpoint, I wanted to have a platform to give people the opportunity to really be their true authentic self and show the world that, you know, guys from like Saquon or guys like, you know, you and your upbringing or Taylor Rooks, like they go through real shit, you know, that people go through real shit. Like
it's not all roses.
People watch TV and think these guys are, you know what I'm saying? Like we're humans, right? And I feel like, you know, media and podcasting a lot of days, there's so many there's so many shows that just like, I don't get anything from watching the show.
It's just noise.
It's noise. So I think, that was one of my goals. Just like, I want people to be heard and I want these people to, like, I want to impact people. So I want to use this platform to impact people. And I want the people on here and people listening to be like, damn, I can relate to what you just said or what Say said or what Miles said. I think that in itself they will live on forever because it's something you could take away from.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
I love that, especially having that vision this early on. Understanding this is what I want to accomplish from the podcast is going to serve you really well.
Yeah, I think a lot of people see like famous people as like kind of superheroes.
Superheroes.
Right?
That's
so
a great.
Like, we have a great personal relationship with so many people who are seen as superheroes, but when you put them in a setting like this and they can be themselves, it's almost like people see like transparency. They see like, oh, this person went through this. This person was depressed after he tore his ACL. You know, I've been depressed before. I can make it through this. You know, I can catch my second win doing this. And
Second win.
you know, there's so many like podcasts where people get on there. They don't even prepare. They just shoot the shit. And it's like, I feel like people don't get anything. Like what he said, like people don't get anything out of that. So I'm like, when people listen to our show, they know we're not going to ask about your girlfriend. We're not going to ask about any like drugs, sex. We're not going to ask about anything like that. Like they know when they get on this, like when people get on this show, they're going to hear people who are resilient and people who made it through something and people who caught their second win and are doing something that they love, you know? So
That's a great point.
you know, that's really my goal for this whole thing.
So in essence, you almost want to. Do you think it's specific to athletics, to sports?
No.
I think second wind is for anyone.
Yeah.
Like that's
I think that's the next.
that's our and that's why I think differentiates us from everyone else. Like it's not you can't put second wind in a box. Second wind can be the random guy walking on the street. Second wind can be you. Second wind can be the NFL quarterback.
Yeah.
Everyone catches a second win. You know what I mean? I've caught many wins in life. You know what I mean? I'm catching my second win right now doing what I'm doing, you know, from playing football my whole life. So
and finding a new passion.
Second wind is for everyone.
And I think like our big goal is like, obviously we have people who are well known on the podcast, but we want to build it to the point where people don't listen or watch because
it's a well-known person.
Because it's a well-known person. We want to be able to get anybody on here and be like, listen, I was a felon and now I have my first apartment and I'm making decent money. That's my second win. You know, I want people to be able to get on here and we have a big enough platform where they can hear anything and be like, wow, like that was a really, really cool story. You know what I mean?
So like if you're trying to get, you obviously have a list of here's who we think we can get, here's what we want. At some point that list you'll have to expand it. And then what's that process?
Honestly,
word of mouth.
It's one of those things, maybe word of mouth, or we ask a friend. We
ask me. Yeah.
My guy.
I mean, one thing that I always say, and that we always say is anybody is one person away. So it's like, you know, everyone, like, I know someone that knows somebody that
knows
I can
somebody.
contact them.
That's
you know,
true.
The worst thing they can say is no. And if they say no, then, you know, no problem, but we'll meet you down the road.
The no is like, how would I say this? Getting told no is being okay with that is so important. It's almost like being okay with failure.
Yeah.
Right.
And understanding that failure is just another step toward your next level of success.
No is just another opportunity for someone to say yes. This show's called The Second Wind, and like I said, for the viewers watching this, hopefully, I know they've learned a lot already, but we want them to take away something from everyone that we've had on here. So what advice would you give to, you know, people watching them, you know, maybe want to be the next you or want to be in the field that you are in, but what advice would you just give?
I would say, I think the failure thing is good, but taking it a step further, I would just say, it really is crazy and also awesome in the sense that like everything does come full circle.
Yep.
And it's just dope to me that you can meet someone and have a relationship with somebody, and then years later that can come back in the sense of like, hey, I was with this guy and he knows you and he says you're okay.
Yeah.
You never know when or how that relationship and that interaction with this person who maybe you don't even know that well, but you never know how that's going to affect you. So I would just say keeping things as genuine and respectful as possible and never burning a bridge. And I have burned bridges because I've been so insulted by something that somebody did to me. But I feel like that's more like young Jordan. Like now I really try to keep it above board.
Trust me, I'm with you, brother.
Yeah. And
I'm
like,
with you.
because you get so angry.
Right.
So insulted by the lack of respect. But you also realize that these relationships are going to come full circle. And I think in my business, in the insider business, but really in any other business, everything is relationship driven. So the more genuine and less transactional, the better it's going to be for you and for that person that hopefully you have genuine intentions for. So I think I would just say relationships, man, like, and grow them, nourish them, develop them, and go in with the understanding that there is a chance that this person's not going to be interested, or maybe they're be interested in 6 months or whatever it is, but never take no as a definite. Yeah. Like, I can't tell you how many, in my example, how many stories I've broken because I just kept pursuing it, you know? And I mentioned the Gronk thing earlier of like knowing when to show restraint. There's certain times where you just want to keep pushing and show how relentless you are and competitive you are because you really want to break through, right? And I think, so I guess the pillars would be genuine friendships, relationships, don't burn a bridge, and then persistence. Because like anything, if it is worth doing, you know, there's other people that are really talented and they're going to be doing the same thing. And they believe that they deserve it just like you do. And so, man, it's one thing to have like the self-confidence to be like, I deserve this. But it's even more important to be like, here's what I'm going to do about it. And I'm going to do it the right way.
See, now I feel bad for texting you all the time. Texting you
no,
every minute
dude.
Now I'm
no, but see, that's a perfect example. Like, there might have been a couple times where I didn't text back because top of mind, I was like, I don't know, or let me hit him later. And then I might have forgotten, but it wasn't malicious. But you reminded me, right? I had an example, and I'll show you the text chain off camera. But I had an example with a GM a couple weeks ago that I've been developing a relationship with, and we're friendly. He won't give me stuff yet, though. Like, I know that, but he will, because he's told me I'm going to help you out. He said to me something along the lines of, I really appreciate that you just kept on me, because I probably haven't given you the time of day. Like, he really hasn't, or he didn't for a while, but I just kept on him. And I knew that if I stayed on him because of the persistence, it would eventually pay off. And I guess, or I had to believe that worst case, he would just say to fuck off, but you got to keep pushing.
Keep pushing, yeah. I'm a believer in that.
It's really important. And so, no, I was never.
No. Dude,
there are certain people that I've texted so many times, and eventually you're like, you do get the picture, but I would never feel upset with it.
Thank you so much, man.
man.
Well, this has been such a great experience.
An honor,
man.
bro.
It's
like
honor
the stories that you
it.
told, and like
some stories I haven't told before.
You appreciate
you, man.
You're like, for me, I feel really, really, it feels cathartic for me.
Be locked in, man.
Yes, sir.
Look, everyone watching, like, comment, subscribe. Go tell your grandma. Go tell your auntie. Go tell your pet fish. Go tell anybody.
Literally.
Repost. We got Mr. Jordan Schultz on the show, and he gave some fire
the best in the business. Please listen to what he was saying. He was dropping some great gems in there. Please like, subscribe, like my man said. Thank you for tuning in.
No, I appreciate you having me. It means a lot. I loved it, and I thoroughly enjoyed this. So thank you.
Thank you,
man. Second Win family. We out.